Hello, welcome to the No Way Jose podcast. Today we're talking the Years of Lead again. We're on part 4 of the Years of Lead, having Doc Inferno joining us once again. Today we've covered in the previous episode. First episode was basically a little bit of a primer. Second episode kind of went some of the early mover and shakers of the Red Brigades. Third episode we kind of went a little bit more in the outside influences. This episode we're probably going to take a little bit of a look back, kind of what does the theory look like on the ground level now that we actually have it in place? How does this play out? Maybe talk about it. Maybe mention another central figure. Maybe get into an event, one of the earlier kidnappings. We'll see what else we get into. But with that, we're going to get into the show. Be sure to hit that subscribe button and hit that bell for notifications so you can see when I'm going live and when I drop new videos.
We know the air is unfit to breathe and our food is unfit to eat. We sit watching our TVs while some local newscaster tells us that today we had 15 homicides and 63 violent crimes, as if that's the way it's supposed to be. We know things are bad, worse than bad. They're crazy. It's like everything everywhere is going crazy, so we don't go out anymore. We sit in the house, and slowly the world we're living in is getting smaller, and all we say is, please, at least leave us alone in our living rooms. Let me have my toaster and my TV and my steel-belted radios, and I won't say anything. Just leave us alone. Well, I'm not going to leave you alone. I want you to get mad.
Welcome back to the show, Doc Inferno, R.I.P. PsyOps. Your bangers live on. I can only imagine the amazing propaganda you'd be making now. But it's a pleasure to have you back with us, Doc. We have plenty to go through, and I'm looking forward to learning up some more about the old Years of Lead.
Yeah, do we go down the Inferno? We go.
Yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead. You could go ahead and take the lead.
So basically where I left off last time is that we were talking about the formations of the Red Brigades, and all of that is pretty much sorted out. We talked about how they started out from just burning car executives and scabs, and they were pretty much putting pamphlets out there doxing their their ops, as they say in the modern day world, not to be corny, but they were doxing people back then, and they were like putting out information about all of their ops, all their enemies, and this leads us to hit the rewind button a little bit. As you can see with the Years of Lead, there's so many threads that connect together, and so many like central figures that sort of connect. And I will say this before I go into the material, saying that in the Years of Lead, it's hard to parse out sometimes who is legit, who is not legit, and that comes on both sides, the far right, the fascist, and that also goes with the Marxist. And some of the people in between with the establishment politicians seem like they're sort of disingenuous and corrupt as well. If we learn anything about this, oftentimes the so-called terrorists actually come out smelling more like roses than the politicians. But much further ado, I'll get into this one group that I'm going to talk about. Is called the October Group. It's named after October 22nd. It is basically a hobby horse, in my opinion, of Feltonelli that we talked about last time. This guy was basically a playboy that was throwing money around, and he was very much in the Marxist scene and he was like a big heavy hitter and a mover and shaker in that scene. So what he had is he had two groups. He had the GAP, and he also had the October 22nd group. And the October 22nd group are kind of interest, and because in later times we see in the Red Brigades, some of the magistrates that they kidnapped are connected directly to the October group in that they are the ones that sentenced the October group. So just to say, the October group is established by a guy named Mario Rossi. Sorry, not Rossi, Rossi. And he pretty much worked as, believe it or not, an animal embalmer. He had, of course, another comrade who was named Augusto Ville, and he was an electronics technician, which used dynamite. And Feltinelli really liked the dynamite. He liked the dynamite so much that he blew himself up, and somewhere around 1972, which was a very bad year for the Red Brigades, he blew himself up at a place called Seagrate. And pretty much, I want to say this also about Feltinelli, is that the Red Brigades took him seriously, but a lot of people thought he was just a hobbyist or an adventurist because he was from a prestigious sort of aristocratic family. They didn't really take him seriously. But clearly, some of the people he's financing, such as the October 22nd group. So they get on the map in 1970. They pretty much organize one of the first kidnappings in the entire years of lead. They abduct a guy named Sergio Gadala. And he's the son of a rich Genoa family and kind of an industrialist, as most of the targets will be. So they hold this guy, and they're kind of the first people also to enact the People's Prison, the Tupamaros. They really take it to heart that we talked about. They hold them for 200 million lire ransom, and unlike Aldo Moro, they actually get the money. They actually surprisingly get the money. The Red Brigades don't have any such luck. So what happens is that they hold this guy for hostage. They hold this guy for ransom. And they basically get their money. They secure the bag pretty much. But this is not where they stop. Okay, if this is where they would stop, I think they would have been more sympathetic. A lot of people would probably see them as a Robin Hood, and some of their intentions is not so clear. Unlike the Red Brigades, their politics are not clearly defined because they seem to have kind of an underworld kind of current to it. Some of these groups you see, like them, they have sort of an underworld kind of criminal element. A lot of these people are, believe it or not, are bandits.
So opportunistic as opposed to idealistic, basically.
Yeah, and a lot of them are just straight up criminals that have adopted anarchism or Marxism because the Lumpenproll kind of has a special place with the criminal and with the person who is, that are kind of marginalized. They're kind of useful to, and I don't want to say that to disparage, Marxism or anything, but it's just the truth. Sometimes they are opportune, and sometimes they're also the first people to inform on people too. Although that's not so clear because you have people like Marco Pachetti, which I will get to. So basically, at March, this is where they end up on the wrong side. Rossi and Ville rob a security officer who was transporting the wages for the Genoa Public Housing Institute's dependents. And this guy was a delivery guy. This guy's name was Alessandro Flores. He tried to stop them from taking the money. Now, that you have to say that's how ironic that is, because Marxists are supposed to be helping out the working class people, the people that are sort of dependent. So they sort of don't have any clear praxis. And like I said, Feltinelli, I think, did have praxis, but he was a bit of an adventurist. He liked to throw his money around. And quite honestly, I think Feltinelli wanted a revolution, like most people in the Red Brigades and everybody else wanted an end pretty much to the Italian state. And they didn't like the compromise that even like if you look at the fascists, they didn't like the MSI, the movementari. They didn't like the MSI. I'm just going to say the MSI. They didn't like them, and pretty much these people are bandits. So they point the gun at Flores. They shoot him, and here's the irony of this: a film student from a balcony who's testing out their equipment captures the whole thing in panoramic view. They have one of these sophisticated zoom cameras, and you may see, if you go look into the years of lead, there's this iconic kind of picture where these people that are scooting off on Vespas, and there's this guy laying in a pool of blood. Well, that's Flores. That's the guy that was killed by Mario Rossi. And Mario Rossi, the trial doesn't, I think, start somewhere around 1972, 1973. This will play a big part in later times with the Red Brigade. They give him a life sentence. They pretty much condemn him to jail, and the left is kind of mixed on this. The Lota Continua people, I think I mentioned them before. They're revolutionaries, but they're moderates too. So they don't like this. The Red Brigades are pretty much, at this time, they're just blowing up cars of executives at Siemens and Fiat. And I have to say, before I go into like the kidnappings, it's important to emphasize one of the main targets that the Red Brigades start out is middle management people. They start out with middle management people, and they gradually creep up to more important figures. And at this time, they're more of a workerist type of organization, meaning they're for like the working class. They've actually have. Here's the irony of this: that the Marxists that were in Italy actually were, a lot of them were working class people. They were not trust fund babies. They were not people from privilege. Although I think Curcio and probably Cagul probably came from more of a middle class background, but they still were not aristocrats. So this is sort of thing. And you got to understand also, at this time also, the workers are enacting these wildcat type of protest. And a wildcat protest is pretty much where a worker just decides that they don't need the union. They're going to picket they're going to picket whatever establishment. And they actually gradually, the Red Brigades pick up a lot of members from initially doing this. So they're kind of seen as a Robin Hood type of figure. They're seen as very, they're seen as like for the people and working for the people. So let's go to, let me briefly also mention what's very important to the structure of the Red Brigades. You have the executive committee. They are basically the nucleus. That they're Renato Curcio, Moretti, and Moretti himself worked in, I believe, a Siemens factory, and I believe like some of the other people they pick up later on work at a Fiat. And Fiat is very important because at that time, Fiat is considered to be run by the CGL, which is a type of fascist labor union. Yes, contrary to what people think, there were fascist labor unions, and what they're trying to do, their mission is to not only display that they are about their Marxist praxis, and it's also established that they're not going to go with like the community struggle like most Marxists are. They have decided early on that they're going to go full kind of armed revolution, but they're targeting not the state, but they're targeting mainly like Fiat executives and industrialists at this point. So the first person they sort of try this out on is a guy named, and this is March 3rd, 1972. It's Ilago Marcherini. Sorry if I'm butchering that name, but he's a director at Siemens. They kidnapped this guy in a van.
Which
and
Siemens
they hold
is
him
like
for,
that's what did they do? They do some sort of mechanic stuff, right?
yeah, I think they're like I think there's some kind of a air conditioner.
They're a German multinational conglomerate company, so I think it's focus on industrial automation, building automation, rail transport, and health technology. Obviously, Fiat is the car company, but
yes.
so it kind of sounds like a sort of like a GE type thing, is what it sounds like.
They have it's kind of like this. It's for like in industrial like products. I think also if you dig deep enough into Seat Siemens, they probably have some Nazi ties. Believe it or not.
Yeah, who doesn't?
That's true. That's so true. Yeah, that is so true.
But I mean, when you're talking about corporations, it is pretty true.
That is true. Yeah. So they hold this guy in a van for like an hour. This is clearly they're taking baby steps, and they're trying this. And I want to emphasize that the Red Brigades, contrary to what people say, are not professionals. They are not professional, even though they do go out in the mountains and they practice with their guns and they play in the mountains. None of these people really are that sophisticated when it comes to pulling off a lot of these operations, which is kind of why I doubt the Aldo Moro stuff, but I'll get into that later. So they hold this guy for an hour, and they take this sign, and it says, "Strike one to teach them all." I believe this is a saying from Lenin. They actually took this from Lenin. What's interesting also is that you've seen that photo of the Red Brigade star, the Brigade Rossi. You see that you see that sign where they're actually holding a gun to this guy's head. If you look at any book on the Red Brigades, you'll see that they're holding a gun to this guy's head. Now, this is an error on their part because unlike other capers and other kidnappings they're going to pull, they end up not using Polaroids. This really screws them because they can actually see one of the people in the background. So they immediately kind of identify after this whole thing is done, and they go and arrest the guy. The Carabinieri basically zeroes in on him and arrest him. And this is like a flaw. So they say after that, we're not going to use, photographs anymore. Yeah, that's him. They're not going to use photographs anymore. They're going to use Polaroids, which is they're disposable. And this is kind of what also screwed the Red Brigades too, and I think screws a lot of extremists on any political spectrum, is they like to archive stuff. So, and they like to show off. I mean, how else are you going to get members, other than kind of showing off? So, also a little background on this guy. Basically, this guy is hated at the factory, and you have to understand the factories are like intelligence vectors. They are places where the Red Brigades are making an inroads. It's where they actually have groups where they teach the workers, which is quite different, I think, from a lot of American Marxists. They don't read Lenin, they don't read Marx, they don't read any of their own praxis, to be truthful with you. So these people are not just working class, they're actually literate, which is surprising. I don't want to disparage any working class people, but in American society, people are kind of loose with their politics. So let's just say that they're not very, and I don't want to insult anybody, but they're not like serious. A lot of times these people in America are kind of LARPers. That's just the truth of the matter.
Well, and we're also talking 80s to 90s time frame in Europe. So like 70s, my bad. 70s. I was whatever. 70s time frame. That's even more so to my point. Like, yeah, I mean, like a lot of people don't realize. I mean, just a few generations back, the difference in literacy. So it's not really even being that condescending. I mean, I remember growing up. I'm only 34. I remember growing up as a little kid hearing stories about people who were like legitimately illiterate. I mean, you don't hear those stories as much anymore, but I mean, I don't know. I mean, there were a lot of people who were manual laborers, and then they genuinely just had no need to read. But anyways, yeah. There's nothing condescending, but it totally makes sense. But that the working class. I mean, hell, that's kind of a common talking point in these sorts of theories is the idea of like the raising of the consciousness of the working class and stuff, and like that's partially part of the problem. And obviously, different sects have different thoughts about that and how to go about it, and But anyway, sorry, go ahead.
So anyway, they graduate from this, and they target another guy that works at Alfa Ramiro, which is another big industrial plant. I think they manufacture cars. I think they manufacture some kind of car product. So they kidnapped this other guy. He's an executive. His name is Michele Minacuzzi. Really interesting name. By the way, most of the people that are actually doing this now are not the later type Red Brigades. These are actually the original nucleus, because their columns have not grown to the point that it will in like later 1974, 1975. So they only really have bases in Turin, Milan, and maybe Genoa. But these are like major industrial hubs. I think Milan is like, and Trento and those places are like amongst the top, factory industrial base. They're like the Detroit or the Flint, Michigan is to America. These are like where Pirelli tires are manufactured as well. So everything's going good for the Red Brigades until there's this guy named Marco Pescetta, which I talked about in my previous stream. I touched upon this. I'm not going to elaborate too much about this guy other than to say this guy knows Renato Curcio. This guy knows all the original founders. And it turns out that he's involved with a little extracurricular activity. He actually was involved in storming the Social Security Department, attempting to do some kind of caper there. And he gets nabbed in 1969. He gets nabbed by the Carabinieri, and also the military intelligence.
He's robbing the Social Security office.
Yes.
That's probably one of the most libertarian things I've ever heard. But go on.
I mean, hey, that was. I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was robbing. Go ahead.
I'm here for it. But go on.
Well, yeah, he was doing that, and like he got caught by the Carabinieri, and the Carabinieri basically, after this, puts him in prison. So he's in prison, and I guess this guy named Vito Micheli, who is like in charge of the SID, which is the Italian military intelligence at that time, and he's assigned this like commander, because you have to understand the Carabinieri are kind of in Italy are designed more like a paramilitary group. It's unlike the the police force in America. Because they have, the mafia, they have like other people they have to deal with. They actually have gangs and bandits that are, believe it or not, violent. Like the Negrenghita. They have all these like groups they have to deal with. So they have these, and even back then. So they flip this guy while he's in prison. And they also force him to make this fake type of confession. Because at this time, what's going on is that the CIA, which Vito Micheli is actually working with. He's very friendly with the people like Kissinger and that, and a lot of the American intelligence. They want to pin a lot of the fascist terrorist activity on the left, and even though like the left has their own little sector of violence and kidnapping, the Red Brigades don't really kill anybody until 1974. And I'll get into that later. So they flip this guy. This guy gets inserted back into Turin. So he says he goes to Renato and he goes to like all his old crew. He says, hey, I want to join in too. I want to be a part of you guys' organization. Well, they don't know that he's kind of a double agent. He's working for the state. He's also spreading rumors that Feltinelli is responsible for the whole Piazza Fontana bombing as well. So he's definitely seated in with the Red Brigades, and he's doing all these mischievous things. So afterwards, he gets nabbed. Okay, he gets nabbed. They find, because of him. Here's the irony of this: they because of him, they find the location. They find the safe house in a raid on May 2nd in a place called Via Biordio, where they catch Marco Pescetti there. They also find Feltinelli's passports, which I talked about later time, which of course have ties back to Czechoslovakia. We won't get into that, but that's an interesting note. And again, they don't make this guy serve his full sentence. So pretty much he's done what he has to do for them. He scurries off. He goes to Germany. And that's kind of the last we hear of Pacetta. And Pacetta is one of the first people to snitch and turncoat on the Red Brigades. And Alberto Francisi, he says at that time in some of his testimony when he's brought up into trial, he says at that point, I wonder why they were just letting us get away with all this. So he suspects that, the state, the deep state at the time, the CIA, the Gladio, all the rest of those people are sort of have their eyes on the Red Brigades. And this is when they go clandestine. This is when they eschew basically all of the formalized kind of, public-facing type of organizations. They go and retreat into these various different properties. They have these apartments that they settle all these revolutionaries in these various different columns. So let me briefly, before I go back into another kidnapping, there is a book called Giorgio, Life of an Italian Terrorist. It's a very dry read. It's not extremely exciting, but it kind of highlights when a lot of people romanticize stuff like, extremism and terrorism. A lot of it is very tedious. It's very tedious work because they assign them to do stuff like everything from shoplifting, but you can't have any connections to your outside world. You have to literally change your name. You have to at least assume a false name. And this becomes a bit of a problem in Italy because Italy is a very kind of tight-knit type of society. They actually go out and eat in these various different, restaurants is kind of a custom in Italy. So if one of your ops kind of finds you there, and one of your comrades finds you there, they're going to wonder why you're going out there and being kind of seen in public. So you got to be very strategic about where you're going and these various different places. And if you have a girlfriend or if you have a wife, they have to kind of convert to the extremist sort of dialectic alongside with you. They can't be out there in the civilian world. Now, they do have these people called irregulars and regulars. Regulars are kind of the brigista. They're people that are foot soldiers for the Red Brigades. They're people that scout. So basically, they spend most of their time collecting information. So a pastime for a lot of the Red Brigades is breaking into these fascist and even these, they don't, and it's not just the fascists. They don't like the Christian Democrats either because they're moderate. They call them Neo-Gaulian. That's the name of the president of France, which I guess was they consider it to be kind of you would call it liberal democracy. They don't like that either. They don't like the Christian Democrats because the Christian Democrats, they think, have sold out. They have betrayed Italy at the time, and they are subject.
So they're at the point where they're willing to do, I guess, violence, I guess you could say, whether it's kidnapping, even if it's limited to that, to political enemies in the sense of people who just have different political views. I just want to be clear because we did kind of want to focus on what they believe. Because you were talking about they did kind of fuck with a lot of like middle management people. And from, vaguely, I mean, I don't know, I guess the specifics of their understanding of Marx, of how they were, believing in socialism. But I would assume they see that as like a middle management as like an aggression or something. So they can find a way to justify that. So I'm just I found that interesting that you're mentioning like actual now just literal political opponents. I guess I just wanted to get a clear idea of what's considered a green light for them and what's not, because I just thought that was kind of interesting.
Okay,
because I mean, from a theory perspective, there's a difference in these two entities, and like I can understand from the perspective of like a socialist how you'd be like someone of whatever that was controlling the means of production that you can it's okay to use violence against them, but someone who just has a different perspective on politics or something, I don't know, but go ahead.
Let me answer that. It's not like America, the Christian Democrats and a lot of the moderate people really are kind of sellouts in their eyes. They look at them as sellouts because they look at them as working for the U.S. State Department. I mean, the U.S. sort of intelligence community, and they look at them as sort of betraying. And they look at like the PCI are like the moderate communists. They're more conservatives. They're more like conservatives and less like Marxists. So these are kind of really revolutionary type of Marxists that actually believe in Marxist-Leninist type of revolution, as opposed to like people like the PCI, which is what they would consider the milquetoast branch of like communism, because they compromise. They don't believe in like full revolution. So they're like, is a great compromise. And that's like a recurring trope in Marxist history. If you study it, it's like a recurring trope that there are these people that are moderates, and they are despised more, believe it or not, than a lot of the fascists. I don't know if they have respect for the fascists, because they actually call every single person they kidnap at the factory fascist, regardless of whether they are not. So you have to understand, to be an extremist, they are somewhat delusional. But I don't want to paint these people as being complete savages. They're not like complete savages. They have a moral sort of center. They do have a moral center.
Just not
even if
they're not principally narrow-minded, I guess you could say.
Yes, they're not
like,
nihilists.
It's pretty ambiguous. It's kind of the spirit of the theory, or whatever that it is. The actual letter.
They're
of
not
the theory.
They're not nihilists. And here's the interesting thing: is that they view violence as being justified because it is for the proletariat in their eyes. Now, here's the irony of this whole thing, and I'm going to get back to the kidnappings. Here's the whole irony. The more they isolate themselves, the more they become detached from sort of the working class people. So although they're embedded in the factories, they're sort of serving the factories, they sort of get lost in their own ideology. And they sort of like lose touch with their base. And we will see this in later times, much later, when they are there is a time when they spiral out of control and they just start killing people that they don't like. They even kill, other kind of communist labor, representatives and labor union heads in later times. But from their standpoint, they think that, doing this thing to the corporate people, even the middle management, which they view as the petty bourgeoisie, they view this as justifiable. And they view these people as also being fascist because they are sort of oppressing the workers. And to be fair, the working conditions in Italian factories at the time were abominable. They were terrible. So there wasn't any kind of reform in like Italian factories at the time. They were really working a lot of people, not to death, but they weren't giving them adequate wages. And in the case of Fiat, they actually do find out there is corruption there, to where they're not allowing, they actually are being one-sided. The fascist labor unions are being one-sided and not allowing like other people with different political perspectives. And that's why I say you have to look at the Years of Lead and sort of Italian politics through the eyes of like Europeans and Italians. They're a lot different than American sort of politics. Like in America, I assume most people are intolerant of other perspectives, although I don't think that's the case on Twitter. But I think there are people that are like kind of will talk to people with different kind of ideologies. But anyway, I just want to put that before I go. I just want to put that in perspective before I go on. Mm-hmm. So the next person they kidnapped is a guy. This is February 12th, 1973. This is Bruno Labate. He's a provincial secretary for the right-wing CISNAL. That is the fascist trade union. This guy is very important, and he's the secretary for the metalworkers section of the CISNAL of Turin. He was known to employ thugs at Fiat. And this, believe it or not, is a very common practice. Even I know your audience likes Henry Ford, but Henry Ford in America he kind of did this, but I'm not going to get into that. He kind of did this also too with the Black Legion. So what's interesting of this is, and there's a book that I read on this by a guy named John Foote. He wrote a book called The Red Brigades, which has just come out, where I get a lot of my information. And he's very biased because he says most of the kidnappings that was conducted by the Red Brigades never reveals any important information to them. I think a better source is, Strike One to Show Them All, which is a kind of a pamphlet or a type of a miniature book, which is more sympathetic, I think, to the leftists in Italy at the time. So you can read those two books and get a different perspective. This guy, I think this guy is biased because he actually says R.I.P. to the Carabinieri policeman in like the front jacket of the book, which, at that time the Italian cops were pretty, the Carabinieri were pretty like corrupt. So anyway, going back into like Bruno Labate. So he's a provincial secretary for the metal workers. He's employing fascist thugs. So they take this guy and they hold him for a much longer period than the initial person they kidnap. And they force him, they of course humiliate this guy. They strip him down to his underwear. They put him at the gate, but they do not kill him. And I don't think they quite are putting people to trial now. That will come at a later period. So they found out that this guy is keeping internal documents that listed all of the records on Union militants. And that is like a big score for the Red Brigades, because this leads them to their next person. This is Arturo Amerio. He is also kidnapped, and unlike Bruno Labate, he is kept for 35 days. This is kind of a record for them, and it kind of goes back to Alberto Francisi's kind of point to why are the State Department allowing the Red Brigades to really get away with this stuff. Because, just a side note, they also are like robbing banks at the same time. And it's so much of a common occurrence with the Red Brigades that the bank tellers recognize all of the Red Brigades, and they actually make jokes about it. So they recognize them. They see them right through. They see them right through their disguise. They know it's them. So that's what's so funny about this whole thing is they sort of like make.
This is like some 1990s like fucking ARA type stuff. This is like the Midwest Bandits are like this is
pretty much.
This is glowy behavior, I guess, is what I would say. Obviously there's levels, so I'm not saying they're literally 100% glow, but it's like, I don't know. You see certain patterns play out in history, and they've done the bank robber thing multiple times. Now, obviously, real revolutionaries do that as well, but like,
yes,
it's a whole fusion thing. This is like kind of like some people get mixed in, and but yeah, it is kind of a common. I mean, I know it's a every
trope.
Now and then you get to a point where there literally are examples of, you can look at in parapolitical history of like, colloquially speaking, feds. That are basically completely contrived groups doing robbery. Sometimes they'll just even plant legends as if they're doing that too, like when they're not really or whatever. They'll kind of do put-ons. So I mean, this is, but obviously there's a component of organic, people who do this as well. But they, kind of, I don't know, it's kind of the whole the Steve Buscemi thing with a skateboard. Like, hey kids, it's there's also a big component of that as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's true, but the Red Brigades are kind of the item when it comes to the left. Like, everyone wants to be like them. You have so many copycats. This is a common occurrence. And, like I said, you have to understand that Italy at the time was in an economic downturn, kind of how America is now with the recession. People were really struggling in Italy at the time. So a lot of this was justifiable. A lot of people saw them as kind of heroes. And the next kidnapping will kind of illustrate my point to that. So they graduate up, and by the way, they before this they also hijacked, I think, a reactionary Catholic association. And, the Catholics are they tilt a little bit to the right, I would say, in Italy. They kind of are, even though like Renato Curcio and Maria Cagul come from a Catholic, and Mario Moretti, as suspicious as his background, they all come from like a Catholic background. It's sort of coded into the Italian type of landscape. It's part of their tradition. But they still are, a lot of them are sympathetic to the fascist or the Christian Democrats, and definitely not to the Red Brigades or to the far left in Italy at the time. But yeah, to illustrate your point, I agree with you, but I don't quite think a lot of the people in the Red Brigades were glowy per se. Yeah. I think a lot of them were just sort of misguided and had a lot of energy and didn't know which direction to go. And it just seemed like that was the appropriate thing at the time. It really goes back to, the activist. I'll say this. I heard this from somebody when they were talking about activist. Activists initially try the whole democracy, right? They try the whole social type of protest, but then that doesn't lead anywhere, and then eventually it kind of boils over into extremism. That's kind of what happens.
It's political masturbation is what it is.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
So the next person is very important, very, very vital. And this is you can kind of see the precursor in this person with the Aldo Moro kidnapping. This is on April 18th, 1974. This is Mario Sosi. This is where they're graduating up from not just executives. They're going for people that are in the legal system, that are in the political system. And I think they even say that it's, they kind of have this saying that they're now turning their attention to the politics. It's like they're going for
where this is where me and them really start to vibe, but go on.
Okay.
I'm being silly to be very clear. Big silly. I'm a silly boy, a silly goose.
Yeah.
But per my theory, I was trying to drive at earlier, what's the demarcation of what would be in the realm of justified, but perhaps not pragmatic in their view? That is in the realm of where, debatably, depending on what we're talking about, if you're talking about actual political actors, we're in you may be able to make a moral case. I just may not be able to make a pragmatic case, because that's kind of where I'm at. But go on.
So they hold him for 35 days. And what's interesting about this, the way they kidnap him is kind of shows sort of the folly of their disorganization. So they scout this guy out. And Mario Sosi is very claustrophobic. And of course, he doesn't want to be shoved into a people's prison. So this is where they start actually really interrogating their subjects. They actually start putting sort of the screws to their subjects, getting them to confess, against their sins, their, what they perceive as their fascism, and kind of avowing all of the things that goes along with what they're doing in the system. And Mario Sosi, the reason why he's targeted is because, and like I mentioned earlier, is that they want their homies of the October 22nd group out of prison. They want to release them. And they think the best way to get them out of prison is to basically kidnap a magistrate that was in charge of putting them into prison. Now,
because that'll totally work. Meet the state with violence. That'll go well, but go
on. So 18 people were involved in this operation. So what happens is rather interesting. Okay, they scout this guy out. They sort of track him. They sort of track him down as he's leaving his work, and they take him along a kind of country road into sort of the back roads at a place called Alessandro, Italy, which is about an hour away out of Turin. And what's interesting is that what happens is that they mistake Mara Kagul's car for because she's driving so close to them as a police, a carabinieri, and they shoot her tires out. So they have these like checkpoints they have to meet up. So she has to like stop the car on this country road, change the tire to catch up to them in the rendezvous point. And this is kind of like where these people are not professionals, like I mentioned earlier. These people are not like trained paramilitary people that are like in and out doing this job proficiently. These are just sort of working class people that have taken it upon themselves, modeled themselves at the Tupamaros, and they have.
You'd mentioned last show this would make a good show. As you're describing this cast of characters and their vibe, I'm like, it would make a good show.
Yeah, it would.
Yeah, it's not fun when it's too perfect of like a spy thriller. So it's more fun if it's goofy actors thrown. You're like, how did this team come together? But go on.
So he goes to this people's prison, which is a confined like basement. They pretty much have rigged the basement to be some type of cell where they hold him in. And at this point, he kind of like realizes that he's I'm guessing the guy was scared. But what's interesting is that he says on trial, when they bring him up on trial, when they get tried later on in, I believe, 1976 to 77, that these people treated him very nice. They made sure that he was fed. They weren't cruel to him, per se, but he didn't like the claustrophobia. Of course, he was very claustrophobic. And he noticed that there was this 5-pointed star. And it said, of course, the words, "Take the fight to the state." Now, at this point, this is causing a lot of buzz in the far left scene in Italy. And they think these people are fascist. And the Red Brigades really are not on the map. They're ignored up until Mario Sosi is kidnapped. They're kind of not on the map, and they think they're, of course, sponsored by the deep state of Italy. Like I said previously, a lot of Italians, they are very keen on conspiracy theories. That's why you have like legends like the Monster of Florence. That's why, I mean, you've literally probably had various different QAnon type phenomena in Italy so many times. That probably, if you can read Italian and
is the Monster of Florence that like early proto like werewolf story?
At this point, it's pretty much two Red Brigades brigadistas that are watching over him. And of course, Alberto Francini, he interrogates Sosi, and Mario Moretti. Now, this is where Mario Moretti kind of is a little sus, to be quite honest with you. He wants to kill Mario Sosi. And and that would have been a disaster for the Red Brigades. That would have been awful. That would have been very bad PR. That would have not won them any points. So he allows him to communicate to the outside world. And what's interesting is that it gets the Pope and the Vatican involved. And the Vatican and the Pope sort of petition the Red Brigades to release him, as they did with the Aldo Moro case. But this goes on deaf ears. And what's interesting about this also is that they put so much pressure on the state. Now, part of their plan was to get the October 22nd group. They wanted to release them to Cuba or to North Korea. They had this middleman. They wanted to make a deal with Cuba and also with North Korea to release the prisoners to basically to Cuba or North Korea. And this, of course, the kibosh is put on this by the PCI. The PCI don't like this. The PCI pressures Cuba to not take the prisoners. And of course, Fidel Castro at that time does not take the prisoners. However, what's interesting is they take this to the high courts. And the high courts want to overturn the October 22nd groups. They want to overturn their convictions. They want to actually release them to save Mario Sosi. So much like Aldo Moro, Mario Sosi is like, why are these people not helping me? Why am I being left here? So he starts to doubt them a little bit. And so he spills the beans, basically. He talks about how the fiat corporates are employing fascist thugs. They are employing the fascists to be muscle, and not only that, they're barring anybody else from getting in their unions and or people from working, and they are shortchanging the workers. And he also finds out, he reveals something, that there's arms trafficking in being sponsored by the deep state of Italy. This is like a big reveal. You have to understand, this is like a big reveal. This is a big win also for the Red Brigades, because they have found justification on why you should resort to these types of actions, because they put the screws to him and he tells everything. And Alberto Francisi kind of develops, I guess, a bond with Mario Sosi. Eventually what happens is they figure it's kind of a lost cause. Let's forget about this. Oh yeah, before I go into that, there's this other magistrate by the name of Francesco Coco. That's his name, ladies and gentlemen. That's really his name. And he blocks the whole thing. He doesn't want, he doesn't want them basically to release Mario Sosi. And he doesn't want to like negotiate with terrorists or anything. So he blocks the whole initiative. He blocks the high courts from going, from releasing the October 22nd group. And this is going to be his death sentence in later times, because the Red Brigades are actually going to assassinate him quite elaborately. That's like their first major kill, you could say. Oh yeah, they got this guy named Corrado Corgi to broker a deal with Cuba. And actually the deal is they're going to give Castro 5 tractors in exchange for the prisoners for refuge in Cuba. So, and here's one interesting thing about this whole thing, is that Alberto Francini, he plans to up the ante. He wants to kidnap Giulio Andreotti, who's a major Christian Democrat leader. And he even went so far as to stalk this guy and scoped him and stalked him going into his church. And he was so brazen about it that he actually, one time, actually tapped him on the shoulder as he was in the church service. So this kind of shows, I think also the isolation is really working on the nerves of a lot of the people in the Red Brigade. So they're sort of like being indoctrinated and getting high off their own supply and getting indoctrinated in their own sort of ideology, to where it's like kind of messing with their mind a little bit. So if they pull off all these things, they're thinking that they want to up the ante and they can get away with other things. And I will say that Giulio Andreotti is a very major figure. And one thing about Italian politics is that he was involved in later times, I believe, in a mafia scandal where he does get disgraced. He does get taken down from his political position. He's also very suspicious when it comes to the Aldo Moro thing, when it comes to Aldo Moro kidnapping. So those are kind of the 3 major kidnappings that the Red Brigades do. There are like other minor leftists, like the Napatista proletariat, nuclei proletaria, that also do sort of the same thing. And they're more like centralized around prisoners and really in the criminal world. Now, here is something interesting that happens on June 17th, 1974. They perform this Padua raid in the provincial headquarters of the MSI, the Movimento Sociale Italiano. The guy who does it is a guy named Roberto Ognigbini. He participates in the raid, and they steal files on the fascist, but they have killed 2 fascists because they sneak up on them and they didn't expect them to be there. They didn't expect them to be there at this time. And what's interesting about this is that it's not very far from the headquarters of a guy named Franco Freda, who many people believe was very instrumental to the bombing of the Piazza Fontana. So they end up so far the Red Brigades have only killed 2 people. All the people they've kidnapped, they haven't killed yet. Also around this time, the luck of the Red Brigade starts to sort of fizzle because, like I mentioned previously in the previous episode, there is this guy named General De La Chiaze, who is an expert on counterterrorism. He smashed the La Cosa Nostra in Sicily. He knows how to deal with organized crime. So the Carabinieri, he forms his own group called the NSA. Kind of interesting with that acronym, but he forms this group called the NSA, and they really want to get rid of the Red Brigades, and they are successful because he ends up inserting this guy named Friar Machine Gun, who basically is this son of this Carabinieri that wants to be a revolutionary, and he ends up being a criminal, going to jail, getting in the French Legion, going to Bolivia, participating in the revolution there as like a minister, a priest, and then going back into the Italian left and basically masquerading around like he's this hotshot type of leftist revolutionary, this Marxist revolutionary that participated in all these different revolutions, with Che Guevara and all these other people. So apparently, as paranoid as Alberto Francinini is, he's not paranoid enough to stop this guy from infiltrating their circle. And he tries his best to infiltrate the Red Brigades. He's successful. He's successful because he's co-signed by a guy named Gian Battista Lasagna. That is really his name.
Like spelled
not to be confused
lasagna?
with lasagna. So he's
can you hear
important
me?
because he is like an attorney.
Can you hear me?
He's also a comrade of Feltinelli, who around this time period is dead, and he convinces the 2 of them that this guy is kosher. This guy is good. And quite unfortunately for them, this gets them caught. And on September 1974, they meet Friar Machine Gun at a train station, but they don't realize this was part of the scheme that was done by De La Chiazi, and they capture and they pretty much shut down, which is like the pretty much the original nucleus, the 2 main people that are kind of the founders of the Red Brigade. But the saga is not over, because on February 18th, 1975, Maria Cagul, she tracks down where Renato Curcio is in a prison at Casale Monferrato. She's disguised with a blonde wig, and she comes in with the package during visiting hours. And notoriously, these prison facilities are lax. That's why they have to really, in later times, devise the Italian Alcatraz, which is the Andriana prison, which is, I believe, somewhere in Sardinia. They have to actually go to Sardinia to start putting a lot of these prisoners. So she points the guns at the guards. She has no problem securing Renato Curcio, who is found reading a textbook on the fabrication of explosives, which is found in the prison library. And that's according to this book, Richard Drake, The Revolutionary Mystique, which is a credible source. In later times, so basically everyone is happy that Renato is back, but not for long. Basically around June 5th, 1975, at Cassini Spiota, which is near a place called Aqua Termi, Mora Kagu is killed, but she's not killed before she does a successful kidnapping of a wine magnate, a guy that is very high up, named Vittoro Valinoro Gancia. So she does pretty much, she stalks him, watches his routines. That's pretty textbook for a lot of the Red Brigades. They like keeping intelligence on people. So she follows him to his castle villa. She's also secured this farmhouse in the location I mentioned. And this is supposed to be a hideout. And this is like used by the Red Brigades. And by chance, here is where the luck starts to run out. The farmhouse they're investigating, the Carabinieri are investigating, and they notice an unusual car that's parked at the farmhouse. Now she notices the Carabinieri, and she starts shooting at the Carabinieri. So a gunfight ensues, and they throw grenades. These are not like actually explosive grenades. I think they're kind of flashbangs, or they're not very effective at blowing stuff up. They fire at the Carabinieri. 2 Carabinieri is dead. She attempts to flee after this, and she is shot in the armpit. And this is sort of the beginning of the end of the Red Brigades. They still tend to like carry on. They still seem to peter on, but this is kind of the end of the glorious days of the Red Brigades. And of course, now what happens now is Renato Curcio is broken by all this. Oh yeah, let me say another detail about his prison break. So after they break him out of prison, they use 6 stolen cars to get him to the location. 6 stolen cars. So in some regards, I guess they are meticulous, but not enough. So on January 18th, 1976, Renato Curcio is captured in a gun battle in Milan. He is injured in the shoulder. He is initially moved to San Vittore in Milan, where he recuperated. He was then moved to a place called Don Bosco in Turin. And so all of them are pretty much in prison. There are still Mario Moretti assumes the role as the new leader, and Alberto Francini is not getting out of prison anytime soon. What's interesting about him is that he's often discounted by a lot of people because he tends to lean heavy on conspiratorial history when it comes to the history of the Red Brigade. And I think people unfavorably sort of snuff him and discard him. And I think he has a lot of interesting things to say about the potential of the entire history of the Red Brigade and the Years of Lead in general. Because I do believe believe it or not, I do believe a lot of the conspiracies around the Red Brigades and the Years of Lead. There's a lot of fishy stuff about them. So they basically, Mario Moretti assumes the new role as a leader. The Red Brigades don't stop, of course. They sabotage and they start. They light up the skies with billions of lire worth of damage at Fiat factories. The Turin trial is about to begin on May 17th, 1976. So this brings us to one of the major killings of the Red Brigades. This is June 1976. Genoa chief prosecutor, that's the guy that blocked the whole initiative with the October 22nd group, Francesco Coco, he is assassinated. And the way that he is assassinated is that he he goes, unlike the other people, he actually goes with, trained bodyguards. He has trained military detail. He likes to go to his apartment and eat. And somewhere around, I think around lunchtime, around this period, they ambush him and they shoot him as he's trying to go up the stairs. And they also shoot the two other military security as well. So all these people are lying in a pool of blood. This obviously causes a lot of controversy. And this is pretty much kind of the also where they have their first major sort of political target. Now, it's believed that the Italian State Security Services knew about the potential Francisco Coco assassination plot. And this is because when Renato Curcio is locked up, he at Don Brasco, he's locked up with a guy named Ronald Stark, who I mentioned previously. This Ronald Stark guy, I think he kind of deserves his own episode, to be quite honest with you. But this guy is the LSD king. This guy is one of the people that brought Orange Sunshine to America. If you're familiar with like Orange, I'm taking a little detour here because I think this is kind of interesting enough. But he created Orange Sunshine. He's a total charlatan. He speaks Arabic, French, and Italian, and he's put in the same prison as Renato Curcio. So he approaches Renato Curcio and says, "Hey, I heard you're in the Red Brigades. Well, I have my own extremist connections too." And he did. He was connected to this radical Lebanese Shia group, which was allowing the PLO to train in his territory. And he also gives Renato Curcio pointers on how to sort of code his attacks on the states. He hands him he like draws this diagram and this map of these Lebanese training camps. I mean, who's to know if like he's telling the truth? I think Renato Curcio doesn't believe him and sort of brushes him off and thinks this guy is full of shit. But this guy does sort of check out as being part of the CIA and part of that whole LSD network that was going on in in Europe and also in America with the Brotherhood of Love and that whole entire like hippie scene, which has a guy named Melon Hitchcock that you may be familiar with, who ties in with various different different sort of groups at that time, and is a very prominent family. He has ties to people like Timothy Leary. He also has ties to all these different extremist groups across Europe, including the Angry Brigade in the UK, which is this anarchist group. He weasels his way into like situationist anarchist circles, which were active at the time. There were even there was a scene also in Italy. And I mean, this guy just kind of glows, to be quite honest with you. And this guy is he also like I said previously, he knows about the killing of Francesco Coco. So obviously he's tapped in with maybe military intelligence. Maybe he's tapped in because the prisons at the time, you have to understand, were very sympathetic to the Red Brigades. So Renato Curcio was not treated harshly in prisons because they had the Napatista Nuclei Armamati, which is the nuclear proletarian army. They were very sympathetic to Curcio. So Curcio was not treated bad in prison, and he had all these perks. He had all the street cred, and so that sort of ends the whole kidnapping fiasco with the Red Brigades. Those are sort of the major kidnappings that occurred. As we could say, incrementally, they're sort of working their way up to Aldo Moro, and even with Renato Curcio and much of their nucleus in prison, they still are operational because they have all these cells. Also around this time, they start developing cells, and this is around 1975 1976 in Rome. And this is like important because what happens in Italy, unbeknownst to a lot of historians, is that the first initial movement in 1968, the Hot Autumn, was primarily working class factory workers. Well, this 1977 sort of direction of the far left is primarily student based. And they have all these riots in 1977. And it's like kind of a major turning point for the years of lead. And of course, they're on trial. And it's a total, their trial, by the way, is a total mockery. And they're still like communicating. They have this guy named Prospero Gali, who is tied to Alberto Francini, primarily through the apartment group initially in 1969. He's basically getting in front of the court and saying how they're taking it to the state. We're going to basically, win this. And he's puffing up all this. And the Red Brigades also that are standing trial at the time in Turin, they deny all counsel. As a matter of fact, this is kind of where they go in like an unusual direction. They start killing jurists. So no one really wants to try them. This one guy named Fulvio Croce, basically they tell him he's the president of the Bar Association in Turin. They tell him basically to, fuck off, and we don't want your representation, and you shouldn't represent us because, we're true revolutionaries. They start throwing shoes at the judges. They cause a commotion. They cause so much of a commotion, they actually have to put steel bars in the courtroom over the Red Brigades. And you can probably see it if you can find a picture of that. They're putting steel bars over the Red Brigades, and it's just it's a circus. The whole thing is like a circus, and they're doing this on purpose because they want to stall and they want to lock the entire procedure. But a lot of stuff is revealed in the court. And this is prior to Aldo Moro. And about the time when the Aldo Moro stuff happens, this whole thing is winding down, but it still doesn't stop them. And what's interesting is Prospero Gali actually escapes from the prison, and he goes and he participates in the Aldo Moro kidnapping. So I don't want to go too much into that, but that he's also just like Rinaldo Curcio. He's kind of an escape artist, and Prospero has a lot to prove to the Red Brigades because he's kind of from a working class farmer community, and he feels sort of like he's even an outcast in the Red Brigades. And so he really wants to prove that he is this kind of macho revolutionary guy. And so he does all these things and orchestrates this, but they did put him in charge of speaking for that. And he also has a rather interesting connection to the super clan that we talked about a couple episodes ago. He has a connection to that as well, which is rather kind of sus when it comes to his connections. He leaves, of course, the super clan and joins the Red Brigades. So on April 28th, 1977, Fulvio Croce, 3 men emerge and shoot him 5 times using a Nagant 7.62. They don't hit him. They don't hit the target. So what happens is a brigadist by the name of Angela Vey delivers the final kill when it comes to killing Fulvio Croce. And I mean, for now, that pretty much wraps it up.
Awesome. Hey, can you hear me? Can you hear me? All right, you cannot hear me. I know the audience can. Doc, I don't know if you can look at the chat. All right, Doc is gone. I guess I'll drop my... What is his channel? I forget. He'll be back in a second, so perhaps I don't know. I guess I'll give my plugs in the meantime. Then hopefully maybe Doc will come back instead of me trying to give his. I forget the name of. There we go. Doc's back. Doc, is that? Can you hear me now?
I can hear you. Yes.
Okay. I don't know what we had this issue last episode too. That's why I basically said nothing almost the whole episode. I did chime in a couple times and I realized real quick. Oh wait, you can't hear me. And I did signal in the private chat. But anyways, we did come to the perfect end there. So. That's like I just was like, whatever, let him do his presentation. So no, you're fine. I just thought it was funny that like I couldn't talk the whole time, which is fine. So I just let you do it.
Yeah.
So I was in my head, I was like, I hope he just keeps going because there could have been like an awkward moment when you're like you tried to interact with me or whatever. It could have got thrown off, but whatever you did it, you basically did like an hour by yourself at least. So good job. But let people know where they can find you at, and we'll do this again soon. But yeah, I don't know. We're gonna have to figure out what the heck that audio problem is because that's a weird. I haven't seen that audio issue a lot. So I don't know if it's something to do with your headphones or something. But whatever. Let people know where they can find you at, Doc. We'll do this again sometime. Not sometime. We'll do it again real soon.
Well, sorry about that glitch, ladies and gentlemen, but you can find me at the Demento Mori podcast. I am in a little bit of a hiatus. I have been on a hiatus for a while, but I am going to relaunch it. And look for that soon. I'm going to have like new episodes and hopefully guests as well. Even if I have to carry the load all by myself, I'm still going to do it. So you can if you just would look on YouTube under Demento Mori, you can catch me there. You can look at some of my previous episodes that I've done. I do a little bit of stuff on the Years of Lead and a little bit of snippets and tidbits about that. So yeah, check that out. And thanks for bringing me on, Jose.
Yeah, no problem. Pleasure to do it. It's interesting to learn about this segment of history, and a pleasure to keep doing it. And I'm sure we'll do more. We'll probably do other stuff other than Years of Lead in the future too. But with that, for those who want to support what I'm doing, leave a like, share, subscribe, comment, leave a 5-star review on iTunes or Spotify. You can find the show on YouTube, Rumble, all the major audio podcatchers, and Twitter as well. On Twitter, that's at TowerGangJose. Everywhere else, it's just the No Way Jose podcast. And if you want to support the show the best way you can do that with money over at patreon.com/NoWayJose2020. Top left-hand corner, you'll see a QR code you can use if you prefer to use that as opposed to the URL. The low-level $2, you get access to a whole host of perks. Try to give you guys early episodes. I do about 1 to 2 of those per week. I try to keep about 4 of those behind the paywall at any given time. That's what this episode is right now. It's one of these paywalled episodes. Now, I also give access to ad-free RSS feed, give you access to Telegram, give you access to pre-show, post-show, and video calls, and me and Austin's weekly live call-in show, Already Dead, which goes out on Tuesdays at 9:30 p.m. Eastern. It's live. Like a big shout out to my sponsors, the highest level of my Patreon. Every episode is a big thank you for their support. And my previous coach and Tower Gang, at Learn Toad, also at Red Brigades, at ZOVRCK, at _Infant Zeal, Tim Tull, at John Cleveland, big fan of the show, Tormay, at Wayne Tagless, 100 Car for Kids, No Free Lunch, Jack, Mark Vestibule, Jacob Winograd, other people can Energy Podcast. With that, guys, we're out of here. Appreciate your support, and be sure that like button, do all those things. We'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.